You've recently, and we had a chat about this yesterday. You've picked up a few commercial deals, right? So the research that goes into a commercial brief, and do you want to just talk about some of the differences, commercial versus residential, for us? Just touch on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think no, for sure. But I think commercial for us is something that's it's a tricky one, because top line, as a residential property investor, you effectively look at a purchase price, you look at comparables, and you try to figure out whether it's going to be a property that suits you or not. Where commercial, to get true comparables for commercial properties, which are probably worth their salt, very difficult to say it's exactly like that property that sold 2 weeks ago, so therefore I can get a value of the property. A lot of the inherent value in commercial is effectively in a lease, and therefore within the actual tenant of that property, be it the business. So a lot of the work that we do is not only on the actual property, the lease itself, it's also in the work that we do with our lawyers in the background. And that's a part that we spend probably 4 or 5 times longer in discussions about the lease, the inclusions of the lease, renegotiations of exclusions, inclusions for settlement, and then also looking at the quality of the actual tenant themselves. And if we're on a short lease, long lease, either way, there's nothing stopping someone from going into liquidation and making that lease redundant. So understanding who is actually renting our property or potential property is a big part of where that extra investment in time goes into. And where the markets that correlate to that are sometimes completely polar opposite to what correlates to good residential investment markets. And just because we're buying in certain markets in from residential, we're probably not buying in any of those markets in commercial right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember Munzrel, you were excited about a couple of deals, and Munzrel was talking to me about some commercial purchases, and you dug a little bit deeper into one and you thought, it wasn't what it seemed. Do you want to just share that story?
I mean, there's a time and place for it. There's a time and place for commercial property. Commercial property to me is all about the yield. Commercial property to me can also potentially be manufactured growth as well, whether it's a mezzanine floor, whether it's to create the more space as such. Commercial property to me is all about the tenancy and the quality of the tenancy that you cite. Commercial property to me also is more in terms of the gross return and the net return. So your gross return could very well be about 10 or 12%, but by the time you take some of those really expensive costs, the cost could be very, very low. So it's about doing the calculation very carefully, but the cycle comes in as well, because I've sort of had few commercial property in Sydney and now in Melbourne. And I bought in Sydney a number of years ago when the net return was about 8.5%. It made sense. Now I look back, some of those sort of commercial property, they're sort of sitting about 4.5%, 5% as a net. Now it just doesn't make sense. The interest by itself is about 5.5% more. And if I look back in Melbourne, is that I bought a couple recently, and the Melbourne, the net return seems to be about 10% or more, right? Commercial property has got its element of risk. Once you have a tenant, you've got a tenant for longer term, generally speaking. If you don't have a tenant, you also don't have a tenant for a longer term as well, right? So there is a time and place for it.